The sound of the fire crackling seemed a bit hypnotic. I stared into the flames as my muscles relaxed from the tension I didn't realize I had. For a moment, I could imagine I was just camping, that everything was okay. It made it easy to nearly miss the crack that came from behind me. I couldn't turn around in time to see the large hands that knocked me to the ground. The force and weight behind his tackle left me unable to take in a breath. As I tried in vain to take in a single gulp of air, I stared into the embers of the fire only inches from my face. "What were you thinking?" He pressed down on the back of my neck, though it meant little since I couldn't even move my chest. "You should have known better. Could see the smoke on the other side of the valley, I bet," I replied with a rasping inhale, just barely managing to take in some air. I could feel his hand wrap around the back of my head. He pushed my face, grinding on the dirt, closer to the embers. The intense heat became blistering and I panicked. I squirmed with all the adrenaline I could muster. I tried to move my arms, legs, a kick, an elbow, anything. He was too heavy. I writhed under him, not even able to fully scream. He seemed to enjoy the sound of my hoarse, panicked cry. I could feel my skin burning. I tried to jerk away under him. "Squirm." I froze. Something about his tone of voice changed. "I told you to squirm," I screamed as a blade of a knife plunged into my shoulder from behind. My cry wavered as I instinctually moved my arm, only amplifying the pain. I didn't even notice his weight lift from me, or the sound of rustling clothes. I tried to lunge forward when his large hand grabbed the back of my head. He slammed my head back into the ground, and once again I was reminded of the coals right next to my face. I let out a choked whine as I tried to get away from the fire. "That's better." Something thick and hot was pressed between my legs. "No!" For a moment, my brain couldn't make sense of the two threats, or decide which direction to try and flee. But all that changed when he shoved himself roughly into me. The position was wrong, and my skin felt like it was tearing. I screamed and pushed forward right into the coals. Tears exploded from my eyes. My body was trying in vain to combat the sparks in the heat. The arm holding my head dragged me backwards, slightly dulling the heat. But before I could appreciate it, he slammed into me again, deeper than before. It was thick and dry, and it felt like he was burning there too. My raw throat was struggling to keep screaming. He began to move consistently as I dissolved into broken wailing. His weight and movement were breaking me down. His thrusting was painfully hard, but deliberately slow. My body and mind were giving out. "Not squealing anymore." He jerked me forward in a thrust that shoved my whole body right back into the glowing coals. I began hoarsely screaming and writhing again as the flesh on my face began to sizzle. That really seemed to set him off. I kept trying to get away from the fire, but it was impossible with his weight slamming into me. Pain was devouring my face as he ground my head into the base of the fire. Somehow, it wasn't enough to distract me from his last thrust struck deep inside me, the pulsing and twitching inside my bruised and bleeding body. Suddenly, to my relief, my head was pulled up and away from the coals. His fist in my hair and the painful position were nothing compared to the cool air replacing the fire. My comfort drained as he whispered next to my ear, "Fun's over." I stared into the trees as I felt the blade drag slowly across my throat. I retched and felt the air and blood pour from my neck instead. I fell to the ground. As I felt my body swaying, for a moment, I was lost in time, living in a memory of being almost entirely asleep as a parent carried me off to my own bed. No, this isn't right. I jolted awake, going stiff at the face of the man holding me. "Good morning, Goldilocks. Though I suppose it's more evening than morning." This can't be real. I squirmed for a moment, and his grip immediately went from gentle to crushing. "Hey, not so fast. You're all out of run anyway." A calloused hand squeezed my arm. "I can feel you've gone all soft." How was he holding me so tightly? It felt like my bones were grinding together. I wheezed in pain. Then I realized he'd carried me outside. Where? I yelped as his arms opened up and I was dropped to the hard ground. Before I could scramble to my feet, he grabbed the back of my coat and dragged the upper half of my body onto the large stump. He held my chest down. I suddenly felt strangely overwhelmed by my senses. The strong arm pinning me to the stump. The smell of cut lumber. The painful surface of the marked up jagged wood. Movement in the corner of my eye. Was that? Please, no. "Don't worry. I'll do you quick." His boot replaced his hand on my back. The voice of defeat told me not to squirm anymore. I clenched my teeth and bared the back of my neck. I heard the dull thump and felt the force of the axe, but I didn't feel any pain. For one horrifying, dizzying moment, I could feel the world spinning without my body. And then, nothing. Where am I? I'm back at the creek. I found the bear trap. It's time for Mason to get his dues for everything he's done to me. I made my way to the cabin, bear trap in hand. Tonight's the night where I finally get my revenge. See you soon, Mason. I entered the cabin and began setting the trap. I spotted a clamp on the table among some other metal tools. Wait, I could use that. I snatched the heavy tool. It's a bit rusty, but it's the perfect size. I swung the trap down off my back and laid it on the floor. I licked my lips in concentration and positioned the screw clamp around one of the springs. It took some effort to twist the screw, but I managed to actually push the spring down. Halfway there, I looked on the table for something to keep the spring closed and spotted a C-shaped metal holder. It was the same rusty metal as the clamp. This must be what these tools are for. I placed the holder on the spring and got to work on the other side. I sweated with effort and nervously listened for footsteps. I'm so close now. There! Phew. I wiped my forehead and looked down at my handiwork. The savage-looking trap was set once again. Who even sells this shit? It must be illegal. I shook my head and got back at the task at hand. I needed a plan. I scanned the floor of the cabin for a good spot. Oh? I grinned at the large fur on the floor. Easy. I dragged the heavy trap over carefully and covered it gingerly with the skin. It's not so obvious anymore. But I still need him distracted. I gulped. The best bait would be me. I wanted to just leave the trap, but this would be the only way I could make sure he wouldn't see it. I steadied my nerves and took my position in the corner of the room. If he looked at me, he won't see it. And if this doesn't work, I'd be dead eventually anyway. It really is the only way. I clenched my teeth and waited. I was wary and terrified, but I stayed alert. It felt like hours, until finally, I heard the rustling next to the door. Adrenaline flooded my body. This is it. The door creaked open, and there he was. He looked surprised for a moment, before gaining his composure. You came right to me, huh? I need to do something. I pulled out my little knife and got in a fighting stance. I like this. He pulled out his own knife. It wasn't much larger than mine. You're shaking like a leaf. I gritted my teeth and held my stance. Come on, just a little longer. I made a partial lunge forward. That was enough. He came at me quickly. You. I was frozen for a moment. It worked. Although, now he was between me and the door. A glint caught my eye. He dropped his knife. A shaky smirk crossed my lips. At the same time, a spark of fear showed in his eyes. He was practically growling, like a cornered animal. I climbed over the chair, just out of his reach, and got behind him. He awkwardly tried to turn to face me, but he froze when he felt my blade on his throat. I gripped his hair and pulled him back. Something inside me was roaring. Maybe it was just adrenaline. Maybe I'd just been through too much. I looked into his eyes. Fun's over. And with one overly harsh movement, I brought the blade through his neck. The gash was enormous and immediately poured blood out and onto the cabin floor. The grisly sight didn't bother me at all. Rather, I felt a rush. I felt high. Is this why he does all this? I wiped the blade on his motionless coat. After I made my kill, it was relatively easy to search the place at my leisure. I patched myself up and kept looking. I eventually found keys, a compass, and some crude notes about a stashed Jeep. He kept it covered far from the cabin. As I drove back to civilization, I felt like I was watching someone else. It was surreal. I was really going to go home. But I suppose I'll never be the same again. Hey, how you doing? I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and more importantly, I hope you're having an amazing day. So if you can't tell, I got a new microphone. I upgraded from a Rode NT1 to a Shure SM7B. So, I think the sound quality is a lot better, but I'll let you guys judge. So, I mean, by no means am I gonna listen to you guys, because fuck you. I'm not downgrading, but... yeah, I like this mic. I think it sounds good. Well... you guys should vote. And by vote, I mean, like, literally, I have a, in my community panel on my channel, I have a vote for which playthrough you want me to do next, either Celia or Derek. Whichever one you want to see next, vote, and whichever has the most votes, I'll do. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.